The diamond ring I spent 3 months saving for sat on our kitchen counter, glinting under the harsh fluorescent lights. 2 years of loving Jessica, of building what I thought was our future, crumbled in an instant when her lawyer slid that prenup across the table. The document might as well have been written in bright red letters, "I do not trust you." Her family wealth needed protection from people like me, she said. Before I continue this story, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you have ever had to make a heartbreaking choice to protect yourself. I never thought I would find myself in this situation. At 32, I was doing pretty well for myself. I worked as a software engineer at a promising tech startup in Seattle. The pay was good, the stock options were promising, and I genuinely enjoyed the work. My life was comfortable, not extravagant, but stable. That was until I met Jessica. It happened at a charity gala for ocean conservation. I had bought a ticket because the cause was important to me, having grown up near the coast in Portland. I was standing alone by the silent auction items when I heard someone comment on the same painting I was admiring. The artist captured the fragility of the ecosystem perfectly. Do not. You think I turned to see a woman in an elegant blue dress, her dark hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders. That was Jessica. We spent the next 2 hours talking about environmental conservation art and our favorite hiking trails around the Pacific Northwest. Jessica was a corporate attorney at a prestigious firm downtown. She came from an old-money Boston family but had moved west for college and stayed. Our backgrounds could not have been more different. While I grew up in a middle-class household with parents who were public school teachers, Jessica spent summers at the family compound in Cape Cod and winters skiing in Aspen. Despite our differences, we connected immediately. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant where we talked until the staff started cleaning up around us. Soon we were spending every weekend together, hiking through the Olympic Peninsula, visiting art museums, or taking cooking classes. Jessica was brilliant, driven, and passionate about the same causes I valued. After 14 months of dating, we decided to move in together. We found a modern apartment downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of Puget Sound. I thought living together would be an adjustment, but our routines melded perfectly. I handled the cooking, she took care of organizing our social calendar. We complemented each other in ways I never expected. Jessica introduced me to her social circle, other young professionals from wealthy families. At first, they welcomed me warmly. There were dinner parties at exclusive restaurants, weekend trips to wineries, and sailing on someone's family yacht. It was a world away from how I grew up, but Jessica seemed proud to introduce me as her boyfriend. When my parents visited from Portland, the contrast between our families became stark. My mom, a high school English teacher, and my dad, who taught middle school science, were warm and unpretentious. They brought homemade cookies and asked Jessica thoughtful questions about her work. Jessica was polite, but I could sense her analyzing them, categorizing them as nice but simple people. Meeting her parents was an entirely different experience. Their mansion in an exclusive Seattle neighborhood felt like a museum. Bernard, her father, was a retired investment banker who now managed the family fortune. Elizabeth, her mother, served on the boards of several cultural institutions. They were cordial but distant, asking more about my career prospects than who I was as a person. My best friend Alan was the first to notice something off. After meeting Jessica a few times, he pulled me aside during a basketball game. "Bryce, she seems great, but do you notice how she sometimes talks about your job, like it is cute that you work at a startup instead of somewhere more established?" I brushed off his concerns. She is just used to a different world. She respects what I do. Despite the occasional culture clash, things were good between us. So good that after nearly 2 years together, I decided to propose. I spent months saving for the ring, choosing a design that matched Jessica's sophisticated taste while still being personal. I planned a weekend hiking trip to Mount Rainier, her favorite spot, and proposed at sunset overlooking the valley. Her eyes filled with tears as she said yes. We celebrated with champagne I had packed up specifically for the occasion. That night under the stars, we talked about our future together. Jessica envisioned a wedding at her family's estate, followed by a honeymoon in the Maldives. I was just happy she had said yes. The initial wedding planning was exciting. Jessica threw herself into researching venues, florists, and caterers. She wanted a lavish celebration with hundreds of guests, while I would have preferred something more intimate. But seeing her excitement, I agreed to the bigger wedding. After all, her parents had offered to pay for most of it. Our personalities balanced each other well. My laid-back practicality tempered her ambitious precision. When she got stressed about wedding details, I could help her step back and gain perspective. When I procrastinated on important decisions, she kept us on track. We were different, but it worked. Financially, we had always kept separate accounts, but split our shared expenses fairly. Jessica earned more than me, but I paid my share of rent and utilities proportionate to my income. We never argued about money, which I took as a good sign. There were moments, though, when Jessica made comments about my career that stung. When are you going to consider moving to a more established company, or have they talked about another funding round? That equity will not be worth anything if the startup fails. I attributed these comments to her practical nature and her background in corporate law. Weekend visits to her parents' mansion became increasingly uncomfortable. Bernard would talk about the family's investments or their latest acquisition, all while subtly reminding me that I was not part of this world. Elizabeth would examine my clothes or comment on my haircut in ways that made me feel I was being evaluated and found wanting. Despite these tensions, Jessica and I shared dreams of our future. We talked about buying a waterfront home someday, having 2 children, and traveling extensively. When we were alone away from the influence of her family and friends, everything felt right between us. 6 months before our wedding date, Jessica brought up the topic of a prenuptial agreement during Sunday brunch. We were eating avocado toast at our favorite cafe when she mentioned it. My parents' financial advisor thinks we should consider a prenup, she said casually, as if suggesting we try a new restaurant. I was not entirely surprised. Given her family wealth, it seemed reasonable. That makes sense. We should both be protected. Jessica smiled, looking relieved. I am glad you understand. My family lawyer can draft something for us to review. I nodded, assuming we would both have input on the terms. Sure, and I will have my lawyer look it over too. 2 weeks later, we met with Harold Winthrop, the silver-haired attorney, who had represented the family for decades. His downtown office screamed old money with its leather-bound books and oil paintings. He slid a document across the mahogany table. This is fairly standard for situations like yours, he explained. Not quite meeting my eyes. As I read through the document, my stomach knotted. The terms were entirely one-sided. I would relinquish all claims to any assets Jessica brought into the marriage, any appreciation of those assets, and any inheritance she might receive. In case of divorce, I would waive rights to any significant spousal support regardless of how long we were married or what sacrifices I might make for her career. More shocking was the revelation of assets I did not know existed. Jessica had trust funds, real estate holdings, and investment accounts that she had never mentioned. The prenup referred to properties in 3 states and offshore investments worth millions. I need time to review this with my own attorney, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Jessica's expression changed subtly. It is pretty straightforward, Bryce. Most of it is just legal language. Still, I should have someone look at it who understands these things and is representing my interests. That comment earned me a cool look from both Jessica and Harold. Of course, she said, but her tone had shifted from warm to businesslike. I contacted Rachel, a financial advisor friend from college, who recommended a lawyer specializing in family law. After reviewing the document, he confirmed my suspicions. This is extremely one-sided, he explained during our consultation. It essentially leaves you with nothing if the marriage ends regardless of circumstance. There are no provisions for how things might change over time if you have children or if you make career sacrifices to support her. When I brought these concerns to Jessica, her response stunned me. My family has significant assets to protect Bryce. This is how these things work when there is a financial disparity. But there is nothing in here that protects me at all, I argued. What if we have kids and I take time off work? What if we move for your career and I have to start over professionally? Jessica sighed like I was missing an obvious point. Those are hypotheticals. We are dealing with actual assets that my family has accumulated over generations. As the wedding date approached, the prenup became a constant source of tension. During a dinner with both our families, Bernard pulled me aside for what he called a man-to-man chat. Jessica has a certain lifestyle that she is accustomed to, he said, swirling expensive scotch in a crystal glass. The prenup ensures that family resources remain properly managed. You should feel fortunate to be joining a family with such prospects. I bit my tongue, but the implication was clear. I was lucky they were accepting me at all. The next shock came when I discovered Jessica had shared details about my finances with her friends. At a cocktail party, her friend Thomas approached me after several drinks. "Heard you were pushing back on the prenup," he said with a smirk. "Smart move building that equity at your startup. Could be worth something someday." I was mortified. My financial situation was being discussed as casual gossip among her social circle. When confronted, Jessica was dismissive. Thomas's wife signed a similar agreement. He was just making conversation. The arguments escalated as our wedding approached. I suggested compromises like review clauses after certain anniversaries or provisions for different life circumstances. Jessica refused to consider any substantial changes. "If you trusted me, this would not be an issue," she said during one heated discussion. "If you respected me as an equal partner, the prenup would not be so one-sided," I countered. 2 months before the wedding, Jessica delivered an ultimatum over dinner at our apartment. "My parents need this resolved. Either sign the prenup as it is, or we need to postpone the wedding." The final meeting with both lawyers present was tense. My attorney had prepared a counterproposal with more balanced terms. Jessica and Harold dismissed it almost immediately. "These changes fundamentally alter the purpose of the agreement," Harold stated flatly. Jessica sat silently, arms crossed. I searched her face for any sign of the woman I fell in love with, but she looked like a stranger, cold and distant. That same week, I discovered Jessica had changed several wedding arrangements without consulting me. She had upgraded to a more expensive venue and doubled the guest list, adding business associates of her father who I had never met. The cost had increased by thousands of dollars. When I asked why she had not discussed these changes with me, her response was revealing. "My parents are paying for most of it, so they should have the wedding they want." "It is our wedding, not theirs," I reminded her. Jessica shrugged. "My family is just being practical about the financial disparity between us. This is how it works in my world, Bryce." Her words stung. "Your world, not our world." After the meeting, Bernard cornered me in the parking garage. His usual polite veneer had slipped. "Jessica comes from a family with standards," he said. "You should feel fortunate we have welcomed you. Many young men would appreciate the opportunities this marriage provides." I was no longer listening to his words, but I heard the message clearly. I was not worthy. I was being tolerated. Later that week, Jessica's sister Lauren reached out to me unexpectedly, asking to meet for coffee without Jessica. "I need to tell you something," she said once we were seated in a quiet corner of the cafe. Lauren was 3 years younger than Jessica and had always been friendlier toward me. "This pattern with the prenup, the control over finances, it is not new. My parents did the same thing to my sister's husband, and now they control every aspect of their lives. They use money as leverage in all their relationships." She looked around nervously before continuing. "Jessica might not even realize she is repeating their behavior. But once you are married, it will only get worse. They will hold financial support over your heads for every decision." Her warning left me shaken, but it also confirmed the unease I had been feeling. That night, while Jessica was working late, I used her laptop to send myself some photos from our recent trip. A notification popped up from her email. Normally, I would never invade her privacy, but the subject line caught my attention. "Bryce, financial management post-wedding." The email was from her father with her mother, and Harold copied. They were discussing ways to manage our finances after marriage, including keeping most assets in trusts and accounts I would have no access to. Bernard had written, "We need to ensure Bryce remains financially motivated without giving him control over family resources." Jessica's reply was what broke my heart. "I agree. I think keeping him financially dependent will be healthier for our relationship in the long run. He works harder when he feels he has something to prove." I closed the laptop feeling physically ill. The woman I loved saw our relationship as a power dynamic, where she needed to maintain control. The breaking point came 2 days later, at a dinner with her parents. The conversation turned to our future home, which her parents had offered to help with as a wedding gift. "Of course, the property would be in Jessica's name only," Elizabeth said casually. "For protection." Jessica nodded in agreement. "It makes the most sense given the financial arrangement." "What financial arrangement?" I asked, though I already knew. "Well," Jessica said with a condescending smile, "since my income and assets are significantly larger and will remain separate, according to the prenup, it makes sense that property ownership reflects that reality." So nothing would ever be truly ours together, I asked. Bernard chuckled. Marriage is about love, not property titles. Except your entire approach to this marriage has been about property titles, I said quietly. Jessica placed her hand over mine, speaking as if to a child. This is just how these arrangements work, Bryce. It keeps things cleaner. You will still live there and enjoy all the benefits. As what? A permanent guest in my own home. Do not be dramatic, she sighed. This is about practicality. But in that moment, I realized it was about much more. It was about inequality at the foundation of our relationship. Jessica did not want a partner. She wanted someone who would fit into her world on her terms. The next morning, I went for a long walk along the waterfront. The Puget Sound stretched out before me, ferries crossing to the islands. I thought about the life I had imagined with Jessica versus the reality that was emerging. I loved her, but I could not build a life where I was constantly reminded of my lower status. When I returned to our apartment, I had made my decision. Jessica was at the dining table with wedding catalogs spread out before her. We need to talk, I said, sitting across from her. About the prenup again, Bryce, we have been over this. No, about us. About what kind of marriage we would have. She looked up, finally sensing the seriousness in my tone. I cannot marry someone who sees me as a subordinate rather than an equal, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I cannot build a life with someone who discusses keeping me financially dependent as a strategy. Jessica's expression shifted from annoyance to shock. You read my emails. How dare you invade my privacy? How dare you plan our life with your parents, while keeping me in the dark, I countered. How dare you discuss strategies to keep me financially motivated by limiting my access to resources? That is not what I meant, she backpedaled. You are taking it out of context. The context is clear, Jessica. You and your family see me as someone to be managed, not a partner to be respected. I slid the engagement ring across the table. I am calling off the wedding. The color drained from her face. For a moment she was speechless. Then came anger. You cannot do this. The invitations have gone out. My parents have paid deposits. I am sorry about the money, but I would rather lose deposits than spend a lifetime being treated as less than. Her anger dissolved into tears, a tactic I had seen her use effectively in arguments before. I love you. We can work this out. I will talk to my parents about changing the prenup terms. It is not just about the prenup anymore. It is about discovering who you really are and what you really think of me. Jessica switched tactics, her voice hardening. My father was right about you. You are not willing to make sacrifices for this relationship. I was willing to sacrifice everything except my self-respect. Within hours, her parents were at our apartment. Bernard threatened legal action for the wedding expenses. Elizabeth cried about embarrassment to the family. Jessica alternated between pleading and cold fury. I stood firm. I will pay my share of whatever cannot be refunded, but I am not signing that prenup, and I am not getting married. The next few days were a blur of accusations and negotiations. Jessica's family suggested I was walking away because I could not get my hands on their money. Friends from her circle stopped speaking to me. My phone filled with texts from Jessica, ranging from apologies to threats. After ending the engagement, I temporarily moved into my friend Alan's spare room. The first week was a fog of grief and doubt. Had I overreacted? Was I throwing away something valuable because of pride? Alan reassured me. You did the right thing, man. That prenup was just a symptom of a bigger problem. They never saw you as an equal. The process of dismantling what would have been our future was exhausting. Canceling vendors, notifying guests, returning gifts that had already arrived. Jessica's family handled their side of the arrangements while making sure mutual friends knew I was to blame for the embarrassment. Surprisingly, Jessica's sister Lauren reached out again. We met at a coffee shop far from their usual haunts. I want you to know you made the right choice, she said. I have watched my parents do this with every relationship in their sphere. They use money to control everyone, including their children. She looked down at her cup. I am trying to break free myself, build my own life away from their influence. Her support meant more than she knew. Here was someone from inside that world validating what I had felt. In the weeks that followed, Jessica made several attempts to reconcile. She sent elaborate gifts to Alan's apartment. She had mutual friends invite both of us to gatherings, hoping to engineer a meeting. Once she showed up at my workplace causing a scene in the lobby. "I will change," she promised. During a phone call, I reluctantly answered. "We can get a different prenup, one that is fair. My parents will not be involved." But the trust was broken. I had seen behind the curtain of our relationship and could not unsee it. "I wish you well, Jessica, but we want different things from a partnership." Eventually, her attempts tapered off, especially after I blocked her on social media and changed my phone number. I found a therapist who specialized in relationship trauma. Dr. Martinez helped me recognize patterns I had ignored, how I had gradually compromised more and more of myself to fit into Jessica's world. "You were experiencing a slow erosion of your autonomy," she explained. "These relationships often start wonderfully because the controlling partner is on their best behavior. The control increases, so gradually you might not notice until you are in deep." The sessions helped me process not just the end of the relationship, but also how I had ended up there. I had been dazzled by Jessica's world, flattered by her interest in me, willing to overlook red flags because I thought I had found someone special. I reconnected with friends I had seen less during my relationship with Jessica. My college buddy Marcus reminded me of hikes and camping trips I had skipped because Jessica found them too rustic. My colleague Damon invited me to basketball games I used to attend regularly before Jessica filled our calendar with her social obligations. 3 months after the breakup, I found an apartment in a different neighborhood, a fresh start. It was smaller than the place I had shared with Jessica, but it was mine, decorated according to my taste, without Jessica's subtle criticisms about my basic style preferences. 6 months passed, and with distance came clarity. I could now see all the red flags I had ignored: how Jessica would subtly put down my career, how she expected me to adapt to her world while making no concessions to mine, how financial discussions always ended with the implication that her greater wealth gave her greater say. I was having lunch at a new cafe when I literally bumped into Natalie, causing her to spill her coffee. After apologizing profusely and buying her a new drink, we struck up a conversation. She was the director of a local art gallery, passionate about making art accessible to underprivileged communities. We exchanged numbers, and our first date was refreshingly different from anything I had experienced with Jessica. Natalie suggested a food truck festival, and we spent the evening sampling dishes and listening to local bands. She asked thoughtful questions about my work, and actually listened to the answers without measuring them against some hidden standard. As we continued dating, I noticed how Natalie approached our relationship as a true partnership. When we discussed splitting the check at restaurants, there was no power play, just two adults, figuring out what felt fair. When I shared my breakup story, she was appalled by the prenup situation. "A partnership means supporting each other's growth, not establishing a hierarchy," she said. 3 months into dating Natalie, I realized how different a healthy relationship could feel. There was no walking on eggshells, no subtle reminders of who brought what to the table. We were building something based on mutual respect, rather than one person accommodating the other. One evening, as we cooked dinner together in my apartment, Natalie asked about my long-term goals. "After everything with Jessica, I am still figuring that out," I admitted. "I know I want a relationship where both people feel valued, where financial decisions are made together regardless of who earns more, where neither person tries to control the other." Natalie nodded. "That is what partnership should be. Equal voice, equal respect, even when circumstances are not identical." That conversation crystallized what I had learned from the painful experience with Jessica. Sometimes walking away from the wrong relationship is the most important step toward finding the right one. Sometimes what feels like a devastating loss is actually an escape from a life that would have slowly diminished you. I do not regret the time with Jessica, because without that experience, I might never have recognized the value of true partnership or had the courage to demand it. The prenup was not just about money. It was about whether we saw each other as equals. And in the end, walking away preserved something more valuable than any financial security: my sense of self-worth and the possibility of finding someone who values me for who I am, not what I can be molded into. Have you ever had to walk away from a relationship that was undermining your self-worth? Leave a comment below, sharing your experience. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength in difficult situations. And if you know someone struggling in an unbalanced relationship, share this video with them. Sometimes we all need a reminder that we deserve to be valued as equals. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from what is hurting you, even when it also feels like love.